Mom told the cousins. She's always dramatic. Then shrank when the oldest cousin said, No, she's just honest. For a second, the clatter of cutlery and low buzz of conversation around the table just dropped out. I felt my fork hover in midair, some sad bit of overcooked carrot dangling off the end, while my brain tried to catch up with what I just heard. My mom's laugh came a half beat too late, high and thin. Daniel, she said, aiming for playful and landing closer to warning. You know what she's like. Daniel didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me instead, elbows on the table, fingers loosely laced. Yeah, he said, voice steady. I do. That's why I'm saying it. She's just honest. My face went hot so fast I could feel it in my ears. I suddenly became aware of the condensation running down my glass of Coke, the way my leg was bouncing under the table, the tiny chip in Mum's good white serving platter. On my left, my cousin Jess went very still. Across from me, Aunt Linda looked down at her plate like maybe if she focused hard enough on the peas, she wouldn't be in the same room anymore. It was a Sunday afternoon, late enough in the year that the light was thin and pale coming through my uncle's sliding glass doors, early enough in the grief that we still called these things family get-togethers, instead of post-funeral negotiations. I'm 29F. My mom is 57. The cousins she was talking to were all on my dad's side: Daniel, 34M, Jess, 31F, and Aaron, 26M, plus their parents and my grandma's empty chair at the head of the table for extra emotional spice. We were supposed to be easing into the hard conversation about grandma's stuff, who wanted the dining set, what to do with the house, all that, when somehow, predictably, the topic veered back to me and my feelings. It usually does. Or it used to, before someone finally said out loud what I've been wondering my entire life. Am I actually dramatic? Or am I just the only one who won't pretend things didn't happen? For context, I have been the dramatic one since approximately age 5. That sounds like an exaggeration, but I can pinpoint the first time I remember hearing the exact phrase. I'd slipped on a wet patch of supermarket floor, gone down hard on my knees, and started crying because, I was a small child who just collided with linoleum. Instead of picking me up, my mom sighed and said loud enough for the cashier and the woman at the next register to hear. Oh, Mia, stop it. You're fine. She's always been dramatic. The other woman laughed and said something about future actress, and my cheeks burned so hot I could barely breathe. I swallowed the sobs, stood up, and limped after the trolley. I remember staring at the blood on my tights and thinking, oh, so this doesn't count. That's kind of been the theme ever since. When I was 10 and woke them up in the middle of the night because Dad was slamming doors and yelling and I was scared he would leave and not come back, Mom told me in the morning, You always blow everything out of proportion, Mia. Adults argue. You scared your father with that dramatics. When I was 13 and had my first panic attack on the school bus, her response at the GP's office was, She's always been highly strung. Maybe she just needs less screen time. When I was 16 and told her one of her boyfriends had made a weird comment about my body while she was in the shower, she looked me dead in the eye and said, Don't start, Mia. You really have to stop making things up for attention. So yeah? Dramatic is not a neutral word in my family. It's the word that discredits everything that comes out of my mouth. It's the word that's been used to rewrite entire nights and years. It wasn't that bad, you're just dramatic. The cousins, for a long time, weren't really in that story. They lived interstate when we were kids. We saw them once a year at Christmas, twice if someone got married or died. In my head, my stuff with my mom was this private ecosystem. Maybe they sensed tension, but nobody ever said, Hey, something's off with your mom. I was just a weird cousin who read too much, and who sometimes disappeared for an hour and came back with blotchy eyes. All of that changed this year when Grandma got sick. My dad's mom, Nana to us, Olive on official documents, was the family gravity. She lived in the same fibro house she and Pop bought in the 70s, cooked roast every Sunday, remembered everyone's birthdays without Facebook. When Dad died in a car accident when I was 21, she was the one who sat with me on the back steps and said, "You're allowed to be angry as well as sad, love," while Mom was inside making lists and telling everyone how she was holding it together for Mia. Grandma had a stroke in February. It wasn't the first health scare, but it was the significant one. Overnight, the Sunday roast stopped. The woman who used to walk up the hill to bingo now needed help getting to the bathroom. My aunt stepped up a lot, but they all had kids and jobs, and Uncle Dave, whose house we were in for that Sunday lunch, was the only son still nearby. My mom, technically, was just the daughter-in-law, but she inserted herself hard into the caregiving. At first, I thought it was nice. They'd always had a prickly relationship. Grandma saw straight through Mom's performative martyrdom, and seeing Mom bring soups and organize physio felt like maybe growth. But it didn't take long to see what was happening. Mom made Grandma's illness about her. Every phone call started with, "Your grandma did this," and ended with, "I'm utterly exhausted, but no one else is stepping up the way I am." I tried to help. I work full-time, but I started going over on Wednesdays after work to sit with Grandma while the others got a break. We'd watch reruns of old game shows and she'd tell me stories about Dad as a kid. Sometimes, if she was in a good mood, she'd softly say, "You know your mum's particular. Don't let her steamroll you, all right?" The thing nobody counted on was Grandma having opinions right up to the end. In May, when it was pretty clear she wasn't getting better, she asked to see me alone. I was topping up her water jug in the kitchen when she called out, "Mia? Bring yourself in here a minute, love." She was propped up with an absurd number of pillows, a tartan blanket over her lap. The TV was on mute, subtitles trailed across some daytime soap. Her glasses were sliding down her nose in that way they always did when she'd been reading. "Close the door," she said. I did, heart thumping. There's something unnerving about elderly people asking for secrecy. It never feels like good news. "I've been talking to the boys," she said. By boys, she meant my uncles. "About the house, about the furniture. They'll sort all that out between them, I'm not worried." She waved a hand. "But I wanted to talk to you about something else." My first thought was, weirdly, that she was going to tell me some scandal about Pop. Instead, she said, "When I go, your mother is going to turn into a hurricane." I laughed, then clapped a hand over my mouth. "Sorry," I said automatically. "Oh, don't be sorry," she said, lips twitching. "It's the truth. Olive doesn't flinch from the truth, you know that." I did. That's one of the reasons I loved her so much. She likes to be center of things. Grandma continued. She likes to tell stories where she's the hero and everyone else is thankful. You've been in those stories a long time, haven't you? The back of my neck prickled. "I guess," I said. She gave me a look that said she knew more than she was letting on. "You see more than people think, Mia," she said. "You always have. Your dad used to say you had eyes like spotlights. Made him nervous." She chuckled. "You're going to see all the little games and performances when I'm gone. And she's going to say you're being dramatic." There it was again. Dramatic. "I need you to promise me something," Grandma said. "Okay," I said, because what do you say when a dying woman says that? "Promise me you'll keep telling the truth," she said. "Even when they roll their eyes. Even when they say you're making a fuss. You don't have to shout. Just don't let them rewrite me or your dad or you. And don't let them talk you out of what you remember." My throat got tight. "I don't want to start fights," I said. She snorted. "You won't have to," she said. "They'll start themselves. You just don't join in the lying. That's enough." I nodded, even though my stomach was a knot. She patted my hand, and that was that. When she died in July, everything happened fast. Hospital, calls, funeral home, casseroles. I watched my mom move through it all like she was on stage, telling the story of Grandma in a flattering way that always positioned Mom as the devoted daughter-in-law, the one who did most of the heavy lifting. She wasn't lying, exactly, she did do a lot. But every time she said, "The others just couldn't cope, but I was there." Or, "Mia," well, she gets overwhelmed. I'm the one who handled the real stuff. I felt that old familiar sensation of my reality being sanded down. At the wake, one of Grandma's bridge friends took my hand and said, "Your mother's been such a rock through all this." And I smiled and said, "Yeah, she's been something." Then immediately felt guilty for the sarcasm. A week after the funeral, my aunt messaged a group chat with me, my uncles, and the cousins. Aunt Linda. "Hey all, thinking we should get together next Sunday too. I guess start talking about clearing Mum's place? No pressure to make decisions, just to see what we're dealing with." Logistically, we all knew this was coming. Emotionally, I was not ready. Grandma's house still smelled like her hand cream. Her cardigan was still on the back of her favorite chair. But there's a weird timeline pressure with estates once lawyers and real estate people start hovering, so we set a time. What I didn't know until the day before was that Mom had been doing her own pre-game lobbying with the cousins. On Saturday night, I was in bed scrolling when a DM from Jess popped up. "Jess. Hey, random Q, are you okay with everything for tomorrow?" Me. Define everything, lol. Jess. Just. Mum said there's been some tension, and that your mum is worried you might cause a scene if you don't like how decisions go. You know that feeling where your whole body flushes hot and your chest tightens like someone's grabbed your heart in a fist? That. Me. Wow, okay. That's news to me. I literally haven't said anything about what I want. Jess. I figured as much, tbh. She made it sound like you were being emotional? But Daniel was like, "Mia has never been the problem at these things." I stared at my phone, heart thudding. It hit me that they'd been having this whole conversation about me as a potential disruptor while I was at home trying to decide whether to bring a salad. Me. I'm not planning on doing anything except maybe cry in the bathroom. Jess. LOL valid. Just wanted you to know what's been said. See you tomorrow XX. I barely slept. Every past accusation of dramatic started playing on a loop in my brain. By the time I walked into Uncle Dave's house on Sunday, my jaw was already sore from clenching. There were platters of sandwiches on the counter, bowls of chips, a half-empty bottle of wine. Everyone was doing that brittle "How are you holding up?" dance. Mom was at the table, center of the conversation as usual, telling Aaron's girlfriend some sentimental story about Grandma's Christmas pudding. When she saw me, she stood up and did the exaggerated hug. "There she is," she said. "I was starting to think you weren't coming." "I said I'd be here," I replied. She laughed. "Well, you know, sometimes you get overwhelmed and back out of things," she said lightly, like it was a charming quirk, not something she'd used against me for years. I bit my tongue. We did the food and small talk thing for a while. When the plates were mostly empty and people had topped up their drinks, and Linda cleared her throat. "Okay," she said. "I know this isn't fun, but we probably should start talking about Mum's things. The lawyer said there's no rush on selling the house, but the stuff inside, if we leave it too long it's just going to be harder." Uncle Dave nodded. "The big stuff, bed, dining table, we can work out between us three," he said, nodding at his brothers. "But Mum always said she wanted the grandkids to pick things that meant something to them. Not just for the money, you know?" Jess sniffled. Aaron looked like he wanted to disappear. Daniel just watched quietly, which is a thing he does when he's thinking hard. Mom took a sip of her wine and said, "Well, I think it should be fair. No tantrums, no sulking. We're all adults." She laughed in a way that was absolutely directed at me, even though she didn't look at me. My chest tightened. I thought of Grandma saying, "Don't let them rewrite me. Don't let them talk you out of what you remember." Speaking of tantrums, Mom went on, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I just want to say up front, Mia, that if you get overwhelmed, that's okay, but we can't have you. She made a vague exploding gesture with her hands. Derailing things. It's hard enough. The room went still. I could feel my heart hammering, my vision doing that slightly fuzzy thing it does when I'm about to panic. I also felt this weird, stubborn bubble of anger pushing up past the fear. I'm not planning on derailing anything, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I'm planning on being respectful and honest. Mom gave a little eye-roll smile. See? She said, turning toward the cousins like we were in an infomercial. Dramatic. She always makes it about being honest like the rest of us are just lying. There it was. In front of everyone. The thing she usually said in kitchens and cars and doctors' offices, suddenly out in the open. I felt all the air leave my lungs. And that's when Daniel said it. Leaning back in his chair, eyebrows up, voice casual but clear. No, she's just honest. That moment is weirdly frozen in my mind. My mom's shoulders, which had been pulled back and squared in her performative concerned posture, slumping just a little. The pink patches blooming on her cheeks. The way her fingers tightened around her wineglass stem. She looked genuinely small. Not defeated, exactly, but like someone had just gently taken away a prop she was used to leaning on. Excuse me? She said. Daniel shrugged. You do realize we were there for some of this stuff, right? He said. Like, when we were kids. We saw things. Mia's not making them up. The silence deepened. Jess glanced at me with wide eyes. Aaron stared at Daniel like he just started speaking fluent French. I swallowed. There was this tiny, terrified voice in my head going, if you say anything now, you're proving her right, you're making a scene. But there was another voice, quieter and sturdier, that sounded like Grandma, don't let them talk you out of what you remember. I'm not trying to attack anyone, I said, hands shaking slightly. But yeah, I'm done pretending things were fine when they weren't. That's not being dramatic, that's just telling the truth. Mom laughed brittle. Oh, here we go, she said. Does everything have to turn into a therapy session with you, Mia? Maybe if someone had listened when she was actually in therapy, we wouldn't be here, Daniel said. The room jerked a little at that. How do you know about that? Mom snapped. Jess cleared her throat. She's my friend on Insta, Aunt Karen, she said. Yes, my mom's name is actually Karen. Insert joke here. People post about stuff. And you told them? Mom said, rounding on me. About your problems? You know how private I am. That reflects on the whole family. I wanted to laugh at the irony of her being outraged that I told our business. After years of her telling anyone who'd listen about my supposed dramatics. I didn't laugh. I told my friends I have anxiety and that I've been working through some childhood stuff. I said, that's not betrayal. That's me trying not to repeat patterns. What patterns? Mom demanded. We gave you everything. You had a roof over your head, food, clothes, holidays. You got away with murder half the time. Don't act like you grew up in some horror story. I never said it was a horror story. I said quietly. I said there were things that hurt me. Like being told I was lying when I said I was scared. Being called dramatic every time I expressed a feeling. Being told I was making up panic attacks for attention. A muscle jumped in her cheek. Oh, for God's sake, she said. Every teenager has moods. You sobbed because your friend canceled on you once. Actually, Daniel cut in. I remember Mia sobbing at Christmas because Uncle Steve had just screamed at her for getting Coke on the carpet, and no one did anything. The image slammed into me, 14 years old, fizzy drink spilled, my uncle's face inches from mine, veins bulging in his temple as he yelled about respecting other people's property. Me shaking so hard the glass rattled on the coffee table. Mom standing in the doorway, saying mildly, Steve, she didn't mean it, but not moving to put herself between us. I remember that, Jess said slowly. I was in the hallway. I heard him. I was scared and it wasn't even directed at me. Mom's eyes darted between them. Oh, honestly, she said. It wasn't that bad. You lot have no idea what real yelling is. My father. And when she said she was scared, you told her she was being dramatic, Daniel said, not letting her deflect. I was sitting in the lounge. I can still hear it. My heart was thudding so hard I thought I might faint. For years, that memory had lived in the category of, maybe I'm overreacting. I'd told therapists about it with the disclaimer. It probably wasn't as bad as I remember. Because that's what Mom had drilled into me. Hearing my cousins describe it the same way I remembered, it felt like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't know was stuffy. I'm not saying you're a monster, Aunt Karen, Daniel added, voice softer. I know you've had a lot on your plate. But I'm not going to sit here and let you frame Mia as some crazy drama queen when a lot of the time she was just the only one reacting like things were weird. Mom's mouth opened and closed. Her bravado had slipped. The "then shrank" part of that first sentence was literal. She did look physically smaller, like all the air had gone out of her posture. Aunt Linda, bless her conflict-averse heart, stepped in then. Maybe this isn't the time, she said anxiously. We're all emotional. Let's not dig up every old. It's always not the time, I said, surprising myself with how tired I sounded. That's kind of the point. It was never the time to say, hey, that hurt, or hey, can we talk about that? It was always, stop being dramatic, Mia. I'm really over it. The words sat there between us. Over it. I hadn't realized until I said them how true they were. We didn't have some big dramatic blow-up after that, ironically. There was no plate throwing, no storming out. Aunt Linda managed to steer us back to the topic of Grandma's belongings, and we went through the motions. This one wants the clock, that one wants the sideboard. Mom stayed unusually quiet. Every now and then I caught her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When it came time for the grandkids to pick something, I chose Grandma's mixing bowl. It's this heavy, old-fashioned thing with a crack down one side that she never threw out because it still works, doesn't it? Daniel chose her radio. Jess chose some of her jewelry. Erin picked Pop's old fishing rod. Mom didn't comment on my choice the way I half expected her to. She just noted it down on the list Aunt Linda was making and moved on. Later, after the dishes were done and people started drifting home, Daniel found me out on the back step. I was sitting where I'd sat with Grandma months earlier, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. He handed me a beer and sat down next to me. You okay? He asked. No, I said honestly. But also yes? I don't know. He nodded like that made perfect sense. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, he said after a minute. About, the old stuff. It wasn't your job, I said. Maybe not, he said. But I saw more than I let on. I think we all did. It was easier to go along with the story. Mia's sensitive. Mia's overreacting. It meant we didn't have to think about why an adult man was losing his shit at a 14-year-old over a spill. I stared at my hands. I started to believe them, I admitted. That I was broken. That I experienced everything wrong. You feel too much, he said. That's not the same as being wrong. And honestly, I think you're one of the few who wasn't lying to themselves. I thought about Grandma's words. She's just honest. Do you think I was out of line today? I asked. Like, did I make it about me? He shook his head. She did, he said. She always does. You just refused to play your assigned part this time. Assigned part. The dramatic one. The difficult daughter. The girl who makes scenes. On the drive home, I played the lunch on repeat in my head, cringing at some bits, wanting to rewrite others. That old voice, Mom's voice in my head, kept saying, you made a fuss. You embarrassed me. You ruined the day. Then I'd remember Daniel saying, no, she's just honest. Like it was a fact, not a defense. And I'd feel that window opening again. Mom didn't call that night. That was unusual. Traditionally, after any family event with tension, she'd ring me to process it, which really meant giving her version of what happened and telling me how I'd made her feel. I'd then comfort her, apologize, promise to be more careful next time. It was our little toxic ritual. This time, nothing. She didn't text the next day either. Or the next. The family group chat was quiet except for practical messages about picking up boxes from Grandma's. On Thursday, she finally broke the silence with a text that just said, "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time. "I'm not happy that we had to talk about that stuff at all," I wrote back. "But I am relieved someone finally said I'm not crazy." She read it, the scene, notification popping up. No reply. 2 days later, a longer message came through. "You humiliated me in front of the family. After everything I've done for your grandmother and your father and you. You and Daniel made me sound like an abuser." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A year ago, I would have replied with a frantic wall of text explaining that wasn't my intention, that I loved her, that she was a good mom, that I was just processing my feelings, and I was sorry for making her look bad. Now, with Grandma's letter bravery in my bones and Daniel's words in my ears, I wrote. I described things that happened. If you're ashamed of how they sound, maybe think about why. She didn't reply. I won't pretend I didn't cry after I sent that. I did. I lay on my bed and ugly cried into my pillow, because defying her, even via text, still feels huge and dangerous in my nervous system. But underneath the fear was something that felt suspiciously like integrity. It's been a couple of months since then. Things are weird. Mom and I are in this holding pattern where we're technically speaking but only about logistics. She'll send a message like, "You left your jumper at Dave's," and I'll reply, "Can you drop it at mine or should I pick it up?" No. Love you. No emojis. If I bring up anything emotional, she either ignores it or hits me with, "Here we go again with the dramatics." At which point I pause, take a breath, and decide whether continuing the conversation will cost me more than it's worth. I've started seeing my therapist weekly again, which I know is a privilege. We've been talking a lot about systems, how every family has roles, and how when one person steps out of their assigned role, the system freaks out and tries to push them back. In our family's script, Mom is the martyr, the one who does everything. I'm the dramatic, ungrateful child who constantly threatens the image, but never actually leaves. Grandma was the one who quietly saw through the bullshit and occasionally slipped me a line of truth to hold on to. Now that she's gone, I guess Daniel has partially stepped into that witness role. I invited him and Jess over for dinner last week. We sat around my tiny table eating oversalted pasta and drinking cheap wine, and for the first time in my life, I heard stories about my family that weren't filtered through my mom. The time she joked that I'd end up pregnant at 16 because I liked attention? They remembered that. They remember the way my face fell. The way Grandma snapped, "Karen!" under her breath. You weren't imagining it, Jess said, twirling spaghetti on her fork. You weren't crazy. You were just the only one not buying the PR version. I cried again, obviously, because I apparently do have a flair for drama, but at least now I can laugh about it too. That's part of why I'm writing this. Not because I think my story is uniquely tragic, it's not. Plenty of people have had it so much worse. I'm not looking for a trauma ranking. I just needed to put down somewhere that being called dramatic your whole life can really mess with your sense of reality, and that sometimes all it takes is one person in the room saying, "No, that's not what I saw," to start untangling it. Mom told the cousins, "She's always dramatic," then shrank when the oldest cousin said, "No, she's just honest." I keep replaying that line in my head, not as some perfect mic drop moment, but as a small, crucial pivot. For years, dramatic has meant I can't be trusted. Now, slowly, it's starting to mean something else, that I feel things, That I say them, that I'm not willing to pretend the Coke spill or the screaming or the panicked breathing on the bus never happened. I don't know yet what my relationship with my mom is going to look like long term. Maybe we'll figure out a new, less poisonous way of relating. Maybe we'll drift into low contact. Maybe there'll be a blow up at some future Christmas, and we'll go no contact for a while. Right now, I'm just taking it one interaction at a time, asking myself, am I being honest, or am I shrinking to make her comfortable? If you've grown up being told you're too much, too emotional, too dramatic, I guess this is me saying, maybe you're just honest. Maybe the volume of your feelings is appropriate to what you've lived through. And if people around you flinch when you name things as they are, that's not proof you're wrong. It might just mean you've stopped playing the part they wrote for you.